one thing that is a red flag for me is when there's inconsistency in what people believe is the process. So if you all aren't agreeing on this process map, maybe we shouldn't be documenting requirements yet. Welcome, everyone. We're going to be talking about translating process maps into requirements. Our guest for today is Paula A. Bell from Paula A. Bell Consulting, aka the BA martial artist. She focuses on business analysis coaching as well as coaching from a holistic perspective, so she can help you with your personal as well as your professional business needs. All right, Paula, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Always good to reconnect and do this with
Yeah.
you. I seem like we've been on a couple of podcasts in different ways, so it's great to reconnect.
Yes, you are definitely one of my favorite people to chat with, especially in regards to business analysis and just business overall with your extensive knowledge in the profession. It's always a good conversation when we get together.
Likewise, likewise.
All right. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. I know, process mapping is such a core part of business analysis, but I do want to talk a little bit about your book, The Waza of Perspectives. You basically use, martial arts metaphor to help people understand their organizations as well as their own mindset. How did you come about that concept? Where did it come from?
Yeah, so Waza means technique or skill. And for those who may not know, I do study martial arts. I study Okinawan Japanese martial arts, Ruku Kempo. And so one night I couldn't sleep for whatever reason, and I was up and I was actually taking a shower, and I was trying to figure out how do I mesh two things that I love together to help me stand out and be unique, because at that time there weren't a lot of people that looked like me that was in the business analysis field. So when I would go to conferences, I just wouldn't see people that looked like me, and I wanted to stand out a little bit more and do something unique to let people know, hey, this is a great profession to be a part of, and do it in a way that was fun and that was different. And so I decided to rebrand myself as a BA martial artist at that point in time. And I actually pitched this concept to my good friend Adrian Reed, who's in the UK, at
Yeah.
a BBC conference. And he offered up his virtual platform in the UK to allow me to pilot this concept. So that's where I did my very first sort of mesh of business analysis and martial arts. And it resonated well. And then I went to conferences, and I had some skeptics at first, some people who were like, I don't get it. But once you understand that martial arts is very mental, as well as physical, but it's very mental, and how you have to prepare yourself for the training, it aligned really, really well for what we do as business analysts to be as effective as possible to help organizations transform their businesses. So that's how it came about.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. And for those of you who are interested, it's such an interesting book, the way Paula does talk about perspectives from the business context. So, highly recommended. I'm going to include the link to that in the comments. So, definitely check that out. Also, in regards to the book, again, you focus heavily on those perspectives and the power of kind of like reframing. How has that shaped the way you approach business analysis and process work?
Well, the reason the book really came about was out of frustration. If I must be honest. So I've been in a consulting role, I've been in a contractor role, I've been a full-time employee. I've been in all three of those roles. And one thing that I've found that we just never really was given the time to do, or we didn't take the time to do, was understand the environment in which we were working.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand the environment in which you're working, trying to help with transformational changes is a little bit challenging. It's not saying that it cannot be done. It's just challenging to get it done because you don't necessarily understand how all the pieces fit together. And
Right.
so for me, the way I think about business analysis is the first thing I need to do, just like in anything I do in my life, whether it's martial arts, whether it's the life coaching I do, you have to understand the environment in which you're in first. And that environment could be you from a life coaching perspective, right? You have to understand who you are. Or if you're doing business analysis work, you have to understand the company or organization in which you work. So these perspectives were perspectives that I found as common themes and patterns, and that were needed no matter what environment you were in. And I took them and I just reframed it to say, okay, let's take a step back. Can we first understand the organization in which we work? Can we
Yeah.
also then understand what the customer experience is that we desire? Can we understand what the customer even wants? Can we then
Yeah.
understand the processes we have in place to be able to deliver what the customer wants? Can we also understand the business rules and the data that play a part in those processes? And if that's actually allowing and giving the customer experience or even reaching the organizational strategies, strategic goals, objectives, all of that, is it all fitting together? So it was my way of trying to look at things more holistically and understanding how these big components all work together. And when you understand that and you take the right steps to get the knowledge on each of these components, you're a more effective business analyst. So that was my thinking based on my experience.
Yeah, and you know what, Paula, I love that concept because always found that the business analysts who struggle the most is the ones that don't try to get that additional context. It's very hard to just come to a few meetings and then try to create requirements documentation, right? But when you really get that background information, learn about the goals, learn about the process, the context, the background information, you really start to just become one with the project, right? And then you can ask better questions and you can almost start empathizing more with the stakeholders, right? So I found that that additional legwork towards the beginning of a project can really lead to better outcomes in the long run and make your job as a business analyst much more effective and efficient.
I
Uh,
100% agree. I mean, let's think about all the pain you might have been causing yourself right now as you think back on your career. And if you could have done anything different, the
yeah.
majority of us would say, at least on a couple of those projects, if we would have known things up front that we didn't know, we could have been more
Yes.
effective.
Absolutely. All right. So, from your experience, why do you believe that process maps are such a foundational part of business analysis?
Oh yeah, I'm biased to process maps. So I love me some process
Me
mapping. This, this
too.
is this is my jam right here. This is one of the techniques that I love the most is process mapping. Process mapping to me is very fundamental and a foundational tool because it helps you understand what we were just talking about, the current state. It also provides you opportunities to see where there's inefficiencies or waste in that current state. Really, really easy, especially if you do swim lanes. If you do swim lanes and you're seeing 50 million handoffs, okay, why are we doing so many handoffs? All right, why do we have so many people touching different aspects of this process? It begins to help you ask those questions and to uncover those inefficiencies. And that's what makes for the requirements. So the
Yeah.
process maps helps you identify what your requirements are going to be because you're going to find where those gaps are, where those opportunities are. Those are now going to become things that you're going to focus on for your future state. So when you create this future state process map now you see all these handoffs, let's automate them. Or let's
Yeah.
get rid of some of them, right? That's where your requirements come from. So this is what we're doing today, but this is really what we need the system to do tomorrow. And
Yeah.
it's a really great visual way of everybody to see what the process is. Because what's happening is your subject matter experts, those who are executing the process, they're executing it so often that they're now just been conditioned to do the process. They may not actually be thinking
Yes.
about where it could be more efficient. They're just thinking about,
Right.
I have to get this process done. And so when we come in as business analysts to say, you know what, I can actually make your life a whole lot easier if we were to
Mhm.
get rid of these things or redo these things or maybe do these things differently and
Yes.
help, which will free you up to do even more of your soul work, even more of that
Yes.
work that fulfills you and makes you happy, right? Instead of you having to do this work over here. So for me, it's a great visual tool to just get a really good understanding of what's happening, as long as you don't add so much to make it so complicated people don't want to read it.
Yeah, definitely. And I have found that even just the process of doing a walkthrough and having the stakeholders say, or having the stakeholders walk you through the process so that you can document it, they start thinking like, well, wait a minute, do we do this? Some it's like, do you even know the process sometimes?
That part.
And
Yeah,
then it's like this person thinks the process is that, that person thinks the process is this. So it really helps the team think, more visually to say, okay, let's come up with a source of truth for what our actual process is versus what we all think the process is. So
that part. Hmm.
just the physical act of creating and thinking about the process can really just lead to a number of positive benefits. even in itself. All right, Paula. So, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that business analysts make when they're either creating or interpreting process maps?
Okay, the biggest mistake I see for creating is you have too many doggone decision points.
Oh, man.
If you have a process map that has 100 decision points in it, you are documenting probably business rules, and you need to
Yeah.
figure out what it is that you're actually documenting. So let me give you an example because somebody might be saying, well, Paula, I don't understand what you mean. I worked in the financial industry for over a decade. Heavy regulated industry where you have business rules all over the place, where you actually need a business rules engine because you have
Yeah.
that many business rules. So I
Yes.
remember I walked into a room one day, brand new team, we were doing process mapping, and I went into the room. I had not been in the initial probably hour or two because I was in another meeting. And I walked into this room and they were doing post-it notes on the wall because we had a big conference room. So they were just writing what they did and they put it on the wall. And Michael, when I tell you about half that room was decision points, I
Oh,
walked
man.
in and I said, okay, what are we doing? Why do we
Yes.
have so many decision points? And they were like, well, these are all the things that we have to think about, which will determine which path we're going. I said, no, these are business rules. What you're doing right now, as far as the process map, is you're determining eligibility criteria for a loan.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't need
Mhm.
all the decision points on every thing you look at to determine the eligibility criteria. So
Right.
you have a box that says eligibility criteria that links to your business rules engine that says these are all the rules, business rules that run behind that process step. You don't have to
Yeah.
document all of those steps. If you do that, number one, it gets too big. Nobody's going to want to read it. It gets confusing because now you done gone down to the 10th decision point. You don't even remember what was the first one that kicked it off. And when
Yes.
we got rid of all of that, do you know we got them four walls down to one?
Oh,
So I
see.
walked in there, it was like four walls, and now we're down to one wall because
Yeah.
we were going too granular. And
Yeah.
so, for what I see when it goes to process mapping, number one is people trying to get too granular. Define what your different levels are from level
Yeah.
0 to level 4. And I liked how someone had done it in a previous role I was in. Your level 4 is when you, and you're using swim lanes, is when you have one user doing one activity. So you only have one
Yeah.
swim lane. And
Hmm.
that person, that role is doing that activity. That's as low as we're going to go.
Right.
And it works for that particular organization. Another mistake in creating that I just got to get out here that I need that I need our business analysts to stop. And I need our business analysts to stop allowing the business and leadership to convince you this is how process mapping should be done.
Oh,
A
yeah.
process map is not a one-to-one to a procedure.
Oh, yeah.
A
Hmm.
process map could leverage multiple procedures in
Yeah.
order for the process to be executed. You do not have, here's my procedure, here's my process map. Well, I could just read the procedure. I don't need the
Right.
process map. I mean,
Right.
it's you have to take it up a level. People,
Mhm.
the procedure is very granular, right?
Yes.
You need the procedure so if somebody's coming in training, they know what to do. The process map is very, it's overarching. Here's how this process works, and here are where the procedures come in. So those are two big things that I see from a creation perspective. From an interpreting, oh, you about to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. From an interpreting perspective, what I tend to see on interpreting process maps is number one, some individuals don't understand the different types of process maps that exist, right? So, business process modeling notation is one, BPMN, but not
Yeah.
everybody uses BPMN to
Right.
document process maps. You have people who just do flow charts. They
Yes.
use basic shapes and they do flow charts. Flow
Hmm.
charts. So you have to know the different types of modeling techniques and
Yes.
modeling tools, get an understanding of them and how to use them correctly. And
Right.
then also another piece is don't just take what you're being told or what you're reading as the process in the process map as gospel.
Yeah.
Observe the process because there
Yeah.
could be things that are missing. So you
Yeah.
might be interpreting the process map correctly, but you're misinterpreting the process because there are
Yeah.
pieces of the process that are missing, right? So there's some due diligence that needs to happen here as you're going through the creating and the interpreting of process maps.
Yeah, definitely. And just to go back to your initial point about using, basically misusing process maps. And you had mentioned it's so important to understand the tools that are available to you, right? Because in your first example, you talked about You walked into this meeting and there's all of these pages of business rules. They're trying to force a process map into a business rules analysis, right? They're more appropriate diagrams for things like that, like maybe a tree diagram or
Hmm.
even a weighted matrix or something like that, right? That could be much more
Hmm.
effective at
Hmm.
analyzing those business rules. So, the responsibility becomes on us as business analysts to learn the tools out there and why they exist. Don't have the same five techniques that you use for every project because you're going to be misusing things and things are just going to not be effective and you're not going to get the expected outcomes. So learning as many tools as you can and really what their purpose is can really go a long way for a business analyst.
100% agree. And business analysis isn't black and white. To your point, I have not done one project the same yet. And
Right.
there's also nothing wrong with starting with a particular tool and then realizing, yeah, this is not resonating with the audience. This isn't working for this particular scenario and switching it up. That's why it's really important to have multiple tools in your toolbox for just that reason, Michael. So I agree with you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's start talking about the translation of this. So, when you are first handed a process map, what are the first couple of things that you look for when you're starting to think about requirements?
Well, first of all, the first question I'm going to ask is how old is this process map?
Good idea.
That's the
Yeah,
first question I'm going to ask because unfortunately we do make documentation, but we don't keep it up. The version history isn't always the priority. Let's put it that way. We've made the process for whatever we needed it for that point in time. And so I need to understand how old is the process because what I might actually need to do as I start reviewing it is I might actually need to bring in some current subject matter experts or individuals who are doing the process to figure out if the process is even accurate. It doesn't make sense to me to sit down here and spend all these hours on a process that's not even accurate to provide insight on something that's not even relevant. And
right.
so I want to make sure that I'm looking at the most current. So I'm going to do everything I need to do to make sure I have the most current and accurate depiction of that process. Then
Good.
that's where my stuff goes in. This is the part I love, where I try and figure out, okay, where are the inefficiencies? Where are things that just don't make sense? If I'm asking a lot of questions, it's not I'm asking questions to make anybody feel less than. I'm
Mhm.
asking these questions the same way anybody else would be coming in and asking, whether it be an auditor, whether it be a new person who's starting and now we're trying to train them. And so I'm
Yeah.
going to start asking questions on things that may not be clear or things I
Yes.
may not understand. One thing I found out about process mapping, even though we have a standard, we have BPMN standard, we have flowchart shapes, people still use the shapes different and
Yeah.
they still document different and they
Yeah.
use different theory different. And so there has to be some clarity that has to be done there to make sure that I'm understanding the interpretation of the process as it is intended to be interpreted. And so for me, the very first thing I'm going to do is make sure I understand current state and understand what on earth's going on. Then from there and understanding the inefficiencies and analyzing it and looking at it and figuring out, I'm going to document those things that I feel are might be areas of opportunity
Yes.
and have a conversation on, okay, am I hitting the mark or am I not? For what I'm seeing, this seems to be something that could be causing pain.
Yes.
And then how does that look? Now, I'm going to bring in another thing also that we don't talk a lot about, but I do feel it's another component of process mapping that's important, and that's process mining. And
Mm.
so when you're looking at the data
Yes.
logs can tell you a whole lot on stories that are being untold. Where is
Yeah.
there to hang up in processing time? Where are we seeing maybe potential bottlenecks, things of that nature? So a lot of people spend a lot of time on the boxes and the decision points and whatnot as well. But imagine if you go into an organization where you don't have time or individuals don't have time, it's not a priority for them to sit down with you to actually flow out, you can process mine as
Yeah.
long as that data is available. That data would have to be available, but as long as those data logs and stuff are available, you can do that. So there's a level of that you can pull in as well as I'm doing the work of analyzing for areas of opportunities.
Yeah.
And then once I get the validation on those, yes, these are inefficiencies. These are areas that we would like to work on. I'm going to create what that future state might look like, get
Yes.
validation on that. And then from there, that's when the requirements work comes in, right? So that's when you start writing the requirements to say, this is the project, this is the scope of the project, this is what we need to
Hmm.
have the project done. Here's the needs and the features, and now let's go down deeper in those requirements as long as everybody agrees with the project scope and things of that nature. And then that's where your project kicks in, and now you're transforming. Now you're
Yeah,
helping to make that transformational change, right? So for me,
yeah,
that's from a high level, just a really quick process mapping. And mind you, this is iterative, so don't think you sit down one time and you're done. This is an
right.
iterative process where you're doing a lot of analyzing, validating, analyzing, confirming, analyzing,
Right.
observing. All of that is happening as you're trying to figure out the process and get to a better process that's more efficient in eliminating waste.
Yeah, and to highlight the point you made earlier about your when you're looking at the process maps, you're identifying these inefficiencies and opportunities. And so, as a business analyst, that's really shaping or outlining our requirements, right? Because every time that we're going to identify an inefficiency, there's an opportunity to address it, and that becomes the requirement, right? So, as BAs, we should always be thinking, okay, how am I going to identify these opportunities, but also identify them in a way that I can use it later as an input into a user story or requirement or whatever type of documentation that you're using. So that was a really significant point there. Okay, and so what would you say are red flags? I think you mentioned it earlier, but I we can highlight it. What are some of the red flags that you would see in a process map when you would say, okay, we're not ready yet to move into requirements? What's
Too
some?
many doggone decision points.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So decision points, lack of clarity.
Yes,
if
yes.
if it's just something that's not flowing logically, it's just not making sense. You're looking at the
Yeah.
process and you're like, I don't understand how we even got here. How did we start
Mhm.
from here and we jumped to here? There's something missing. We're not ready yet, would be my understanding
Yeah.
as well. If you're doing swim lanes and the roles aren't clearly defined,
Yes.
missing something as simple as missing connectors, missing either this lines or missing a start and a stop.
Yeah.
Understanding the difference between a main process and a sub process. Is this really
Oh
a main
boy.
process or is this a sub process of a main process? And if I'm asking that question, we're probably not ready because we could be creating a whole lot of work that doesn't need to be created because
Yeah.
we just don't have the process map organized correctly. So those would be some of the red flags. Using inconsistent shapes, using inconsistent words. I know I was on a process team. They were sticklers if that activity didn't begin with a verb and it didn't begin the right way, right? Is
Yeah.
it really a action or is this something different? Trying too much granularity is another
Hmm.
red flag for me too. Did you all just take a procedure and recreate a process map off of a procedure? Is this truly the
Yes.
process?
Yes.
Those sort of things is what I look for process mapping. And honestly, sometimes people get frustrated because they're like, well, I spent a lot of work and a lot of time doing this. That's great. And I
Yeah.
appreciate the work and time. But if
Yeah.
it's not usable and it's not
Right.
serving the purpose of us to be able to move forward the work, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be
Right.
used anyway. So
Exactly.
yeah, so we may as well just do it right the first time or correct our wrongs and get it right instead of having our feelings hurt talking about I put all this work into it. There's been times I've had to scrap stuff that I put a lot of time into, but if it's not serving the end goal of the audience being able to consume it and digest it to move forward the project or initiative, what's the point of doing the work? So
Right.
getting out of that mindset too of I just got to create documentation to create documentation. More
Definitely.
doesn't always mean great. Sometimes less is more.
Yes. Definitely. I think one thing that is a red flag for me is when there's inconsistency in what people believe is the process, right? So if you all aren't agreeing on what on this process map, maybe we shouldn't be documenting requirements yet, right? So
Yeah.
let's make sure there's consistency there. You mentioned consistency in notation and things like that. And so we want to take that and then also make sure there's consistency in what people believe is
Mm-hmm.
the process,
Mm-hmm.
or at least something that we can agree on is the process before we move into that whole next state.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yes. So that's good insight we're getting here. What do you believe is a misconception? So, when people think about process maps, what do you think is a misconception about how stakeholders view process maps
Mm.
in your experience. Like I feel like people think it's more of like just a checklist item, but I feel like it's, so much more useful than that.
Yeah, people shy away from process maps. You know what I think they do though, because now they're going to be held accountable. And so
Yes.
now you've documented what you do. And so now you have to either defend it or justify why we do what we do. It will uncover things that maybe people don't want uncovered.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so that's some of it. But I also think some people think process maps are just a waste of time. Why do this?
Hmm.
I already know what I want. I already know what's going to fix the problem. I'm the
Yeah.
one who's been doing this work or who's seen it. I don't need you to tell me through a visual what I need to do. And I love working with people who have that mindset
Yeah.
because in the past I have had to work with people who've had that mindset. And then when we do a process map, they're like, "Well, I didn't know that was happening." Exactly why we're doing the process map. Because you
Yeah.
might be in a silo doing your own
Yeah.
thing. You don't know what's happening upstream, downstream, or right next to you. Because I've
Yeah.
been on teams where people process differently. They're doing the same process, but they're doing it in a different way. And some
Yeah.
are more efficient than others. So sometimes I think they feel it's a waste of time. I think that's the biggest thing. When we were trying to do document processes in this financial institution I was working for, there was a lot of resistance. So more so, it was resistance of I don't have the time. I'm already stretched thin, just running daily operations, and now you're asking me to do this. Well, would you prefer we ask you or the government come in and ask you? Because that's the point we're at
Yeah.
right now,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
I mean, we're at that point. And then if the government comes and asks you, you still have to figure out how you're going to make this happen. And then we're on their timeline versus on our
Right.
own. We
Right.
have a lot less that we control because they're controlling that. So what's your poison? What do you want to do?
That's
What do you
it.
want to do? And I think a lot of people think that doing process map work is just a lot of work. And so they think it's going to take up a lot of time. For me, a current state, I personally feel you should be able to knock out a current state in a week. Future
Hmm.
state is a little bit longer because you are trying to analyze and figure out where you need to change things up in the current state. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, I've had people who can't even, to your point, get me the current state in a week because they can't agree on how they do it.
Right.
And so you're here trying to observe and figure things out and trying to get everybody to agree. And sometimes it's the personalities that make it harder to get the process maps done. Documenting the process, I could document a process map in probably a day. You give me depending on how complex the process is or how many processes and sub processes, I could knock that thing out quick.
Yeah.
However, it's everything you have to do to get the data to knock out the process map sometimes is what makes it long, but it's so needed because again, how do you know the solution you are about to put in is going to meet the need of the stakeholders that their needs? And a
Yes.
lot of times what you could end up doing, I got to add this piece in here too, you could end up actually adding more risk to the organization by
Mm.
not doing the process map because now you're implementing a solution that has taken another part of the organization down to their knees that has now put them in a compliance risk
There you
because
go.
you didn't think about how you were impacting other areas, other people. And so process maps can help you figure that stuff out early and alleviate some of that pain. Why go through that pain if you don't have to?
Right. Yeah. So I think this is a good segue because you talked about uncovering things a little bit earlier. And I know in your book you talk a little bit about how the shift in perspective can kind of uncover hidden truths. So when you're reading a process map or a diagram or extracting out requirements, do you have any type of specific process for doing that? Or is it just something that usually just jumps out at you as you are analyzing the map?
So for me, as I'm analyzing the map, a lot of things jump out to me, and then I start asking questions. And
Yes.
then when I start asking those questions, that's when I start uncovering those hidden truths or
Yes.
those things that people consider are unspoken, the unspoken rules that we do in the organization that
Yes.
is potentially putting us at risk. A lot of times too, what I also find out is when I do process map workshops and I'm documenting the process and you have the right stakeholders in the room so you understand all the upstream, downstream, those in the middle, everybody who's supposed to be working together, and you get them in a room, it is comedy to me. Oh, you did that. We do that. We
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing that.
Oh.
Do you
Hmm.
all know that when you do that, it causes us this pain up here? And you start
Yeah.
to uncover that. And that's the power of it because then they get to hear from their colleagues the pain that's being
Yeah.
caused based on the process we have in place. And again, I used to see that a lot when I worked in the financial industry. It's a quite complex, convoluted industry. And it was no ill intention at all. People are just trying to do their job. They're just
Right.
working through the job, but they don't realize the pain is causing in other areas of the organization. So when I'm looking at a process map and I'm analyzing, those things start to pop up to me. I start asking questions. Especially if I get to a decision point and I don't feel that that decision was answered clearly enough
Yeah.
before we move to that next step. I'm like, but wait, but what happens if it is a no and then this happens too? You
Yeah.
start asking all of those questions and you start
Yeah.
uncovering a whole lot more. And I find you do tend to uncover it more at decision points. So
Yeah.
it's when those decisions are being made and people are saying, well, and actually, a lot of people too have a problem documenting what comes before and after a decision point.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what was the input into that decision? And then after that decision's been made, what should be the actual output? And some
Yes.
people have a hard time documenting that, articulating that.
Hmm.
And so that
Yeah.
tells me something there too. If that decision point, the input and the output to it aren't clear, I then have a question there too. What are we missing? Are we missing something in here? And then swim lanes tell me a whole lot too. Because I've seen some crazy stuff happen in some of these handoffs. I'm like, how are you handing this off? You haven't even determined. I'm confused. What just happened here? How did we get here? Sort of
Yeah.
thing. So those areas just show me a lot when it
Good.
comes to looking at the process map and trying to understand and uncover those things that
Yeah.
aren't spoken.
Yeah. You had mentioned you start asking questions about decisions and things like that. What other types of questions do you typically ask when you are reviewing process maps with stakeholders that usually lead to good requirements?
How long does this process take? What are
Hmm.
some of the bottlenecks that you've experienced? What in this process frustrates the heck out of you that you wish you could just get rid of?
Yes.
What doesn't make sense and you question why you do it, but you've been told to do it all this time, so that's just what you do because nobody's told you to do anything different?
Yeah.
What have been some of the previous conversations that you've had and concerning this process where you've had frustrations and why did they make the decision that they did? Gives me a little bit more intel on the way people think and why they're thinking the way that they think. If you
Yeah.
could change anything in this process to make it more efficient, what would it be? I
That's a
always
good
get a
one.
whole lot. Yeah, I always get a whole lot
Yeah.
for
That's a good
from
one.
from that one. Do you think this process should even exist? I've asked
Oh
that question
man.
too. Should we
Yeah.
even be doing this process? What
Right.
value does this process add to the customer experience or the overall organization? What are the parts of this process that don't add any value, but you do it
That part.
anyway?
That part.
Who would you prefer? Why do we have 50 million handoffs? Why are we handing it off this many times? And what caused these handoffs? Are these handoffs just a band-aid? I do ask that question a lot too. What parts of these processes just a band-aid because we haven't had a chance to automate it?
Yeah.
So we just keep adding band-aids on top of band-aids on top of band-aids instead of fixing the root cause of the issue. So what is the root cause that's creating this havoc in this process and how can we get rid of it? Should this process even be done by this department or should it be handled by another department? Why is it
Yes.
here? Right. So those are some
Right.
of the questions off the top of my head that I can think of that I'll be asking as I'm analyzing the process itself and trying to figure out what should we do going forward? What should that future state look like? Because the future state could be there is no process. It could be the process it goes to somebody else, or it could be the
Right.
process stays here, but it's going to be a little bit more refined, so it's a little bit more
Yeah.
efficient. So there's many different ways that this could go.
Yeah, I love those questions because I find it so interesting how many times I've asked someone, well, why do we do this? Or, whatever, what's the value? And they're just like, I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm told. They're just going
Mm-hmm.
through the motion. A lot of people don't think about why they're doing what they're doing. And then to your point earlier about bringing in different groups of people, you might find that there are so many steps being double worked. Like, why are we checking it here and checking it here? Is it potential for it to change from here to here? If not, why are we checking it so many times? Right. So yeah, those types of questions and conversations definitely uncover so many inefficiencies and bottlenecks in the organization. So yeah, it's definitely good to have an arsenal of questions that you have ready for the stakeholders when you're analyzing those processes for sure.
Well, you just sparked another one when you said, why are we checking the process here? Why are we checking the process here? Why do we have 50 different levels of approval? Why do we
Uh,
have a second level, a third level, a fourth level?
yes,
Okay, so if we have to have this many levels of approval, something is definitely broken. That means we don't have the right
yeah,
controls in the process because we should
right,
not need to have this many levels of approval on
right.
something if we have the right safeguards in the process.
Yeah, it gets insane. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I'm not alone in experiencing those
Not at all. Not at all.
those
But
types
I
of
still love
organizations.
process mapping though.
Oh
I
yeah, for
still love
sure.
it.
Well, that makes you love it more, right? Because this is the value of it, because you're uncovering
Exactly.
these things and you have the potential to resolve a lot of it.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get a little granular here. So once a process is mapped, what are the steps that you take to start drafting those requirements? How do you trace it to requirements?
So once the process, the future state is drafted, at that point, I've highlighted in my process map those areas that have changed, just for an easy
Mhm.
visual to say, this is what's changed from current to future. This is where analysis gets very interesting because it depends on what was uncovered in
Yeah.
that process mapping. So I'm going to start to document what are the needs and features, the main needs and features of whatever we're doing going forward. And so once I figure out what those needs and features are, then so let's say you have about 5 needs and 10 features, just real easy numbers. I need easy math today because I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not I need the easy math. So five
Yeah.
needs, 10 features. And then I'm going to start going more granular and breaking down those features and what those features actually mean. So
Hmm.
let's say say I'm in the financial world. So let's just keep it in the financial world. I'm trying to change how we apply for a loan.
Hmm.
And there are some steps that I want to automate on how to apply for the loan. And so what I would do is I would say whatever that gap is, gap A that I found, we need the ability to apply for the loan online and get a real time result back on whether I'm going to be approved or not. Let's just
Yeah.
say, right? So now I'm going to start writing the requirements. So what does that look like from a system perspective that I'm going to need? I'm going to need the ability to have the user input information in order to analyze that information to determine what they are eligible for. I'm going to need some sort of confirmation message back saying that the information was submitted with some timeline of when they're going to get it. But let's say we want it instant. So I then will get a confirmation of some sort saying, hey, we got your information. We're processing. Don't close this browser or whatever as we're processing. If you
Hmm.
close the browser, you're going to lose everything.
Yeah.
Close the browser, and then I need a message that pops up that says that yes, you are eligible for this loan, you are pre-approved for this amount of money, and then maybe from there go forward, and if I want to get, let's say, a home, go forward and maybe ask me some questions to determine if I'm ready at that point in time to be connected to whether it's a realtor or somebody who can help me start looking for a house or something like that, right? So I'm going to start breaking down all of those requirements of that feature on how I want this to flow. And I'll
Yeah.
do that for all of my needs and all of my features and how I want that to
Yeah.
flow. So once I have that documented, I might even do some mock-ups, some screen mock-ups just to show the idea of what I'm thinking on how the sort of like a little storyboard sort of thing to show how I would like it to move through the customer experience, all of that good stuff you'll
Right.
have in there. And then I would get all the stakeholders together and present, get feedback, get, no, this isn't exactly what we were looking for, or yes, you hit the mark, or can we tweak this and whatnot. Take that information back, do any updates that need to be done, and then send it out for formal approval. Get that approval, hopefully. Get the approval,
Yeah.
get it back, and then I would update my traceability matrix. That's how I'm going to trace it back to the process, is through my traceability matrix. So it'll trace back to the process, and then it'll trace forward to the solution being developed, the testing, the procedures, all of that good stuff that comes after the fact. Now, this is just me doing waterfall. My agile, the people who love agile, I know that it's not agile. Don't get on me. Don't come for me. I know that. I'm just but from a logic perspective, I don't care if you use agile, you use iterative, you
Yeah.
use waterfall. I'm still thinking the same way.
The same
The
way. Yeah.
tools that I produce might be different. The deliverables might be different, but I'm still thinking through what are the features, what are we needing the system to do if it is a technology sort of project. If it's not a technology project, let's just say it's a process improvement project that does not require any technology at all. What are those things that I need the business to do in order to make this process more efficient? So it could be something as more of updating procedures, these steps in the procedures need to be updated, things of that nature. It's really what's the way I think about it is what's the desired outcome and what are the steps I need to do to get to that desired outcome. And
Yeah.
that's what makes business analysis very interesting to me because there's always this gray. It's not black and white. There is not one rule book that will say for every project, this is what you
Right.
do.
Right.
What does stay the same for every project, this is how you think.
Yeah.
How you execute what you think might be different, but the thinking is still the same. I'm now thinking about how do I create this transformation, this future state transformation in either written word or visual to help whoever is actually going to be the one that is going to create the solution and implement the solution to be able to do that. And so that's how my mind works when it comes to business analysis. I keep it real simple. I don't do
Yeah.
all of this extra heavy theory trying to figure stuff out. I just think if I
Yeah.
was a person and a customer, I put myself in the customer's shoes. How would I want this process to work? What would I want my experience to be? And then layer that to can we actually do it? Because I know there's some
Yeah.
situations we our hands are tied for certain things. And then I also consider how much time it's going to take and how much resources it's going to take to make something happen depending on the process too. So that's in my mind. I have my functional, my non-functionals and my performance and then I'm also thinking about tech if it's a technology project and all of that. But and I should go back to something I just said there. You have my functional and my non-functional. So I'm also thinking about performance. I'm also thinking about my expectations on how long is a user willing to wait for a pre-approval message to come back up. If I'm
Yeah.
spinning for 10 minutes, I'm going to leave that screen.
Yeah.
People want stuff instant, right? So we need to be
Yeah.
able to run that rules engine real quick to get them
Yeah.
back results in 1 to 2 minutes because that's what people
Yeah.
are going to want. 1 to 2
Right.
minutes. So those non-functionals are just as important as the functional requirements, especially as you think about user experience.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, there's so much that goes into this. And like you, I try to keep things as simple as possible. Personally, I like to trace elements of my process map to aspects of requirements. So like, I go in thinking, okay, my actors, those are my stakeholders, right? The
Mm-hmm.
activities or the process boxes, those are my stakeholder requirements or my user stories. The decision points, those are my business rules, like we talked about earlier. Or, if there's any system interaction, those might be some integration requirements, right? And then it's like, okay, having that understanding that, if I'm using an activity diagram or BPMN, that level of visual itself, that's really going to get me to about stakeholder or user story level. To get to the functional and non-functional requirements, I'm going to have to start extracting some things out of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for my UML people, right, you got to also know the sequence of granularity, right? High level, your use cases, your activity diagrams, right? So that again can get us our business rules, our stakeholder requirements. But then you need to start thinking about the statuses, state diagram. Then when you get to the functional requirements, you might need something more detailed like a sequence diagram where you've got those operations and protocols and things like that and methods. And then of course the class diagram. So that's like data, functional requirements, and things like that, right? So a process map isn't always going to get you every single thing, right? If you are more of a visual person, you're going to want to understand where this process map fits in with the other diagrams that I might use before I can extract those requirements. But if you want to keep it simple with just a process map and then extract that, you can extract those activities or process steps into use cases right from the diagram, right? So just kind of have like your game plan, right? Of how you want to tie things together and then where we're going to pull things out. So I usually like to have a little plan mapped out before I get into it. Otherwise, I'll just my head will start spinning.
Hmm. Well, if you look at what the BA box says, right? So the BA box says you start with your enterprise strategy analysis, right? That's one. Well, they don't tell you what order to do it in per se, but you start with that. In my mind, this is how it fits together. You start with that, then you go into your business analysis, planning, and monitoring, and that's where you start thinking about what are the deliverables, the tools you're going to use, the methodologies, communication plan, all of that good stuff, right? Then you go into elicitation and collaboration, and
Yes.
that's where you start extracting and getting all that. I love how you took the different shapes and you also attached them to the different aspects of requirements. I was thinking as you were talking, the timer. The timer could be related
Yeah.
back to your
Oh,
non-functionals, right? Because the timer is
yes.
telling you how long you can wait for something to happen or how long you can wait for something to be
Yeah.
done. Your entity relationship diagrams, as you're looking at your business rules, can also go back to the data too, right? So there is many
Yeah.
different ways to do it. If you're a very visual person and you want to do that, I know there's some people who are scared of sequence diagrams, state diagrams. They're scared of the activity diagrams. I get it, but that still doesn't mean that you can't leverage those and it won't make sense to somebody else to be able to leverage those and use those. And then for my individuals out there who might already have organizational assets where your organizations tell you these are our standards, these are the
Oh,
standard documents and things that we use, still use your standard documents. Don't
yes.
shy away from that, but that shouldn't limit you also of leveraging other tools that help you organize and get things together in order to produce the organizational assets that already exist. So
Yeah.
that goes back to our initial conversation up front when we were talking about the amount of different tools and techniques that you can use. You just have to know when to use them and what to use and what they're being used for. And once you
Yes.
get that down, sky's the limit.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I know we're talking about specifically process maps today, but I think overall as a BA, just understanding a various amount of diagrams in general. And I've been seeing a lot of IT BA struggle or
Mm-hmm.
technical BA struggle because they're not equipped to look at architectural diagrams. You should be able to look at a architectural diagram that maybe the solutions architect built or a developer built to see how that's going to translate into technical stories or technical requirements. Because otherwise, if you're not able to do that, or you don't even have to know how to create them, if you could just learn how
Mm-hmm.
to read them,
Read them.
right, that'll
Mm-hmm.
go a very long way, right? Otherwise, that role you would be dependent on the architect or the developer to tell you, okay, how is this project going to impact technical requirements, right? So, like I said, for those of my IT BAs or technical BAs, definitely understanding how to interpret,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily create, but at least knowing how to interpret those diagrams can really go a long way to make you more effective at your job. I want to hear your perspective on what gets missed for organizations or BAs that might rush straight to requirements into design without process mapping prior.
So what I've seen happen when this has happened before, as far as what's getting missed, is you might again think you know what is happening, but you really don't know what is happening, nor have you given yourself the opportunity to find out what is really happening. So what happens there is you start building a solution, you go down the path, and then you get into testing.
Yes.
And then there's different levels of testing. So your regression testing is probably going good. Your
Mhm.
IST is probably going good. You get to the user. The user starts testing. Wait a minute, but we have to do this before we can do this. But I don't know
Mhm.
where this is anymore because it's not a part of the process. Well, we
Yeah.
didn't know you had to do that. Well, you never asked. I could have told you.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you can miss really big components again where and I personally would like to see BAs think about this even more so. And I've been writing a little bit about it, and I'm going to write more about it next year on the importance of having on a risk management hat
Oh
when
man.
you are doing this work, because at the end of the day, you could end up getting blamed for
Yeah.
putting the organization at risk.
They love blaming
And
these days.
who wants to go through that? And the reason you could be put at risk is because you didn't do your due diligence up front to understand all components and all parts of the process. So if you jump right to, okay, we have a project scope, we're going to jump right to, I already know what needs to be built, I already know what needs to be done, and you do no sort of observing or any due diligence to figure out what the environment truly is, you've already started at a high risk project in my mind, because
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know, but you don't
Right.
know because you didn't ask.
There you
And
go.
there's no excuse for that. You have to
Right.
ask the questions. Now, if you get pushback, this is what I'm gonna tell BAs too. If you ask the question and you get pushback, we don't have time for that. Document it, because you
Yeah,
did do your due diligence. You asked the question, and this is
exactly.
the response you got. So it's
Right.
not like you weren't aware. When you know better, you do better. Y'all chose not to do better.
Right. Exactly.
I tried, and then
Yeah.
they'll try and tell you you're not a good team player. Don't let them do that to you. Has nothing to do with that. I tried to tell you, but we missed this whole component. That's really important. It's
Yeah.
no different. I don't know why we do this in projects and we don't do it in other parts of our lives. So if you go to a car lot to get a car, you just gonna jump in the first car you see and drive it off the lot. You're gonna pay
Yeah.
thousands of dollars,
Right.
and you're just going to drive it off the lot, because that's essentially what you're doing with the project. You're just
Yeah.
getting in the driver's wheel, you're just driving. You
Yeah.
don't even know if you're even going to like the vehicle. So after day two, you realize, I don't like the way the vehicle feels. I don't like the way the steering wheel steers. I don't like how hard I got to push down on the brakes. I don't have heated seats no more. But you didn't do your due diligence up front to figure out if all those amenities were there for you. So that's
Yeah.
nobody's fault but yours, because you
Right.
didn't do your due diligence up front. So I equate it back to when we don't do our due diligence up front, when we don't do our understanding the current environment and really truly understanding what's happening today, there's a great chance that we're going to miss components that again will put us at risk, or miss components altogether that is going to make the process worse because we
Yes.
didn't take time to understand how the process was in the first place. So it's not worth it. You're going to do it at some point in time. You're either going to do it up front, or you're going to do it at some point in time in the project. I would prefer just not to have all the pain and the stress. I would prefer to do it up front than do it in the back end.
Yeah, definitely. And whenever I coach a team of BAs, I tell them the risk management is not just for the project manager. We have to understand there's a difference between project risk and product risk, or some people might even call it solution risk. The
Yeah.
project risk, that's for the project manager. They're worried about the team, the timeline, the budget, things like that. The product risk, that's for us. Anything that creates risk from, as we're going into building out this product, or even after we get to this solution, what's the level of risk that still remains, right? Those are things that we as business analysts should be considering. So, a lot of BAs might think, oh, that's the project manager's role. False. We need to be thinking about that. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Paula. All right. So we are close to landing the plane. We got through some good questions today, Paula. If there was a way for a BA to get better at translating process maps into requirements, what type of skill would you think that they need, or how can they improve that skill?
Well, this is an interesting one. You need critical thinking, you need analytical thinking, and you need problem solving. And those skills are not skills that you could just be easily trained on.
Yeah, right.
That's what makes those hard. You can be trained on them. It's just that it takes some time for you to acquire them to where they become a strength. But to me, those are three critical. Experience is another. Learn from. Take
Mhm.
everything that you've learned and just use it. Use it
Yeah.
again, whether it was a good experience or a bad one. Use it to know how you should move going forward.
Mhm.
I would also say educate yourself. Take classes. There's a lot of classes on business process modeling, notation. There's a lot of classes on just business process itself. You can take trainings. There's nothing wrong with investing in yourself and getting better at doing this work. Have taken a lot of different trainings on business process. I'm gonna tell you, when BPMN came out, I didn't understand the thing. I didn't understand these shapes. I didn't understand. I'm gonna tell you, the gateways were the things that got me. Them
Oh,
inclusive
that's
and
the fun
exclusive
stuff.
gateways. I'm telling them doggone gateways and when to use them and how to use them. But I took training on it, extensive training on it, and I feel comfortable with it. And there's still people who argue how you should do things, but
Yeah.
I'm good enough that I know what I need to do there.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're not well versed in the different type of process models that you can use, because again, it's not just a process map. To Michael's point, you have activity diagrams, sequence diagrams to get training on them.
Yeah.
Michael trains, so I'm gonna put a plug in. Doc
Yeah.
White
Yeah,
trains
definitely.
trains you on this stuff. I don't do the training and anymore per se. Any training that I do, I work with junior BAs, with BAs who are entering into, and they don't have that support system. That's who and I'm at ground level when it comes to like business process, because I don't want to overwhelm or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
the
if
foundational
there's
stuff.
the foundational stuff. But if you want to, get those trainings, look at what the BA doc has to offer and get trained. The more you do it and get out your comfort zone, the better
Yes.
you'll be at it. And trust, you might be thinking that everybody else gets it. There's probably not as many people that you think get it that actually do and
Yeah.
actually enjoy doing it as well. But there's a lot of different tools that you can leverage. And I would also say there's a lot of tools now that are more robust than a Visio or Lucid
Hmm.
Chart, right? Start to get to know those tools as well. Those tools who make it a lot easier so that they do the simulations, they do the process mining and things of that nature for you. Get to know those tools as well, because there's nothing wrong in understanding that technology, and understanding that technology actually helps you to translate better too, because you're taking in data, you're watching how that data is being used, and that's all
Yeah.
we're doing. A process map is just data. It's just a
Yeah.
visual data that you're taking in. So figuring out how
Yeah.
to take that data and to use it, but that would probably be what I would say. It's a lot of it's training. You just have to be trained, you
Yeah.
have to do it.
Yeah, and I love what you said, right? You got to get training, you got to invest in elevating yourself, right? But I would invite those BAs or in some people who are in similar roles. What I did when I was learning different diagrams and things like that, I didn't always show it to other people. Like, don't think just because you produce something, you have to show it to someone else. Like when I first started creating entity relationship diagrams, I would just create it for myself as a learning tool. I didn't necessarily share it with people until I felt comfortable not only showing it to other people, but also leading a workshop where we're actually building it out, right? So that's a good way, keep it to yourself. You don't always have to show everything that you do. Learn about it privately. Just learn, right? Yeah, so I definitely agree with you there. So looking ahead at how AI tools and other automation is affecting the way BAs work with process maps and requirements. What human skills do you think are irreplaceable in that matter?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I'm a huge AI fan. AI isn't new, y'all. AI's been
No,
around for
it's
decades.
been out
It's not
forever.
new.
It's not new. It's definitely not
It's
new.
not new. It's just getting a lot of attention right now, and people are
Yes,
using it. People probably just didn't realize that it was out there to be used the way it's being used right now. So it's
right.
not really new. It's not going to replace humans. Well, actually it can. AI is powered by humans. So I mean, it can't just replace humans. What it will do is help you do your job more efficiently and
Yes.
help with that. So, will it maybe cut down on how many people you might necessarily need in a particular department? Yes, but it can't take away the human perspective, because if you look, we could probably do it right now if we wanted to. We could go to Chat GPT. My Chat GPT, I have a name for my Chat GPT. Chat GPT Darcy, I'll, ask him how he doing and whatnot. We have a whole
Darcy.
relationship going on, Darcy. Yeah, we have a whole relationship going on. He knows my tone. He knows how I
Mhm.
write, right? You and I could probably ask the same question and get two different ways it's
Yeah.
being said, or
Yes.
ways, or what's being said back to us, right? With the same question. But it took us as humans to prompt, to ask the question. We had to put data
Yeah.
in to get data out.
Correct.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's always going to have to be somebody who's going to feed the data in to get the
Right.
data out. So for
Right.
me, I say to all of my BAs out here, leverage AI to make you more efficient.
Yeah.
If you have a requirement that you're struggling on how to write it, put it in Chat GPT or in some other
Yeah.
AI and say, can you please help me make this more polished? right?
Yes.
Or make it to where people would understand it, or make it to where a third grader would understand it, because
Yeah.
maybe you're being too verbose.
Right.
I personally look at AI as a supplemental tool, just like all the other tools that I use to do my business analysis work. Think about it. Were you scared when Visio came out?
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
Right.
that's how I look at it. It's just that the media and everything that's being it's just being talked about more. So you're seeing
Yeah.
it on social media more, you're seeing it in the media more and whatnot, but it is yet another tool that can help
Yeah.
us do our jobs more efficiently and effectively. So leverage it. And
Yeah.
yes, will some people probably be impacted from a job perspective? Yes. But don't we do that when we do projects anyway, when we make the processes
All the
more
time.
efficient? That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons some people don't want to talk to us in the first place is because they
Right.
fear their job's going to be taken away,
Is my
right?
job safe? Yeah.
So it's the same thing here. I say leverage the tools and let them help you be more efficient and effective and demonstrate. I would say be careful on getting just reliant on the tool. Like that's what you
Yeah.
just rely on. But there's
Right.
nothing wrong with leveraging the tool. I think it's gonna be great. And I don't think it's gonna take away the whole human aspect of it. Because again, AI is generated through human interaction anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And people need to understand that, right? GPT literally means generative pre-trained transformer, right? So you have to train it, right? The human has to train the AI in order for it to be effective, right? So the AI
Mhm.
needs us just as much as we need them. So it's not going to replace us. So what I will say is that, we need to learn how to use it in a way that is going to allow us to, like you said, those little monotonous things, let the AI do that. And we can focus on the things that provide more value, like our judgment, our experience, right? Our critical thinking. So we'll have much more time to offer that human element, right? Because we're not focusing on just getting the little bits and pieces done or executed, right? So yeah, that's a really good point that you made earlier. So, as we land the plane, Paula, for our listeners who resonated with your approach or your conversation today, how can they go deeper with you, or how can they connect with you?
Sure. Well, you can connect with me. I'm pretty much on every social media platform. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Definitely,
Yeah, I
definitely
am. Yeah, I'm
do.
all over the place. I'm all over the place. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Paula A Bell. You can connect with me. LinkedIn is probably one of the fastest ways to connect with me. My website is www.paulaabell.com. Make sure you have two A's in the middle. That is paulaabell.com, or you will go somewhere else. And that you can get to all of my social media, different social media platforms, and to me through my contact form, everything there, instead of me trying to list all the different places I'm located on social. So it's probably the two quickest ways to get to me currently.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Paula. This has been an awesome discussion. I'm
Yes, it
sure.
has.
Yeah, I'm sure my audience will get a lot of value from it. And be sure to check out Paula's YouTube channel. I'm going to have that tagged in the description below as well. And also be sure to check out the videos that I am going to link below because I've got a few different videos about process mapping that you all might be interested in. So be sure to check those out as well. All right, everybody. See you all next time. And it's been a great conversation. Bye for now.